The party ended the way all parties do, too suddenly, with the lights turning harsh and the music collapsing into awkward silence. 1 minute, the house was breathing. Bass thumping through the floorboards, laughter bouncing off the walls, bodies brushing past each other in the hallway. The next, it was just me, standing barefoot in my living room, holding an empty glass and wondering how it got so quiet. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Not a storm, just enough to blur the streetlights into long, trembling streaks of gold. The kind of rain that makes everything feel heavier, slower. I started collecting cups from the coffee table, the smell of cheap cologne and spilled beer clinging to the air. My head was buzzing, not drunk, exactly, just full. Full of noise, full of things I hadn't said, and full of him, Ethan. I hadn't invited him, that was the strange part. He'd shown up with a mutual friend, late, already a little soaked from the rain, hair darker than usual, eyes scanning the room like he didn't quite belong there. When our eyes met, he smiled like it was a secret we shared. I told myself it didn't mean anything. It couldn't. He was straight, at least, that's what everyone said. And he was trouble, the quiet kind that doesn't raise his voice but somehow still pulls the ground out from under you. By the time the last guest left, hugging me goodbye and promising to text, I realized something was wrong. The guest room light was still on. I froze, one hand resting on the back of the couch. The house creaked softly, settling into itself. The rain grew a little louder. My heartbeat did too. Everyone was gone. I'd watched them leave. I remembered locking the door. So why was there still a light on? Maybe someone forgot something, I told myself. A jacket, a phone charger, an excuse to come back. I walked down the hallway slowly, the wooden floor cool under my feet. Each step felt louder than it should have been. The walls seemed closer, the air thicker. As I reached the guest room, I heard movement. A soft sound, fabric shifting, a breath. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorframe. This was the moment where I could turn around. Pretend I heard nothing. Go to bed alone, like I always did, with the ceiling fan humming above me and my thoughts kept carefully in check. But curiosity has a way of winning when loneliness has already softened you. I stepped closer. The door was half open. And inside, sitting on the edge of the bed, shoes off, shirt wrinkled, looking like he'd been there longer than he should have been, was Ethan. He looked up when he heard me, eyes widening just a little. "Oh," he said quietly. "I was hoping you'd come." My throat went dry. Hoping. 100 questions rushed through my head, all colliding at once. Why hadn't he left? What did he mean by that? And why did the way he said my name, soft, uncertain, feel like a hand pressing directly against my chest? The rain outside intensified, drumming against the roof like a warning. I stood there, unsure whether to step forward or back, because whatever came next, I already knew one thing for certain. Nothing about this night was going to stay simple. And I had a feeling, neither of us would be sleeping alone. Ethan was still sitting on the edge of the guest bed, elbows resting on his knees, fingers loosely intertwined like he was waiting for permission to exist in the room. The overhead light was off, but the lamp by the bed cast a soft amber glow that carved shadows into his face. He looked different like this, less guarded, more real. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "You didn't leave," I finally said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He exhaled slowly, eyes dropping to the floor. "Yeah, I know." Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Somewhere in the house, the pipes knocked faintly, adjusting to the night's cooling air. The rain outside kept tapping insistently, like it was urging something forward. "I thought everyone was gone," I added, more to myself than to him. "They are," he said. Then, after a pause, "I just needed a minute to think." I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded loosely across my chest. My heart was doing something strange, beating too fast, then too slow, like it couldn't decide what this moment meant. Ethan and I had known each other for almost 2 years. Not closely, not intimately. More like satellites in the same orbit. Same friend group. Same parties. Same casual jokes exchanged across crowded rooms. We never talked about anything real. And yet, there was always that look, brief, fleeting, gone before I could name it. I can grab my jacket and go, he said, standing abruptly, as if the decision had already been made for him. The sudden movement startled me. No, I said quickly. Too quickly. He stopped, halfway up, and looked at me. Really looked at me. His eyes searched my face like he was trying to read something I hadn't spoken out loud. I mean, I corrected, swallowing hard, you don't have to rush. It's late. It's raining. It was a weak excuse, and we both knew it. He sat back down. Something shifted in the air then. Not dramatic, not loud, just different, like a door closing quietly somewhere in the house. I stepped into the room, the carpet soft under my feet. The guest room smelled faintly of clean sheets and leftover cologne, his, probably. I suddenly became hyper-aware of everything, the hum of the lamp, the sound of his breathing, the space between us that felt charged instead of empty. Did you have fun tonight? He asked. I let out a small, humorless laugh. I hosted. That usually means I don't remember half of it. He smiled faintly at that, then nodded. You seemed distracted. My chest tightened. Was I? Yeah, he said softly. Especially when I got there. There it was. The thing we'd both been pretending didn't exist. I looked away, my gaze landing on the rain-streaked window. You showed up out of nowhere. I didn't think you'd mind. I didn't say I did. Another pause. Longer this time. I almost didn't come, he admitted. Something told me not to. And yet, I murmured, here you are. He ran a hand through his hair, fingers lingering at the back of his neck. The gesture felt intimate, even though it shouldn't have. Can I ask you something? He said. My stomach flipped. Depends. Why do you look at me like that? The question hit harder than I expected. Like what? Like you're trying not to. The room felt smaller, warmer. I crossed my arms tighter, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands. You're imagining things. He didn't argue. That somehow made it worse. Instead, he stood again, slowly this time, and took a few steps toward the window. The lamp cast his shadow across the wall, tall and distorted. I'm not, he said quietly. I've felt it for a while. I should have stopped him. Should have laughed it off. Should have changed the subject or asked him to leave. Instead, I said, felt what? He turned back to face me. That when I'm around you, he said, choosing each word carefully, something feels off. Like I'm standing too close to a line I'm not supposed to cross. My pulse roared in my ears. And that bothers you? Yes, he said immediately. Then hesitated. And no. I took another step into the room without realizing it. The distance between us was shrinking, not because either of us reached out, but because neither of us stepped back. You're drunk, I said, though he didn't sound drunk. So are you. Not like you. Then why does your voice sound like that? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't unravel everything. The rain outside thundered harder, briefly drowning out the silence between us. I stayed, he said, softer now, because I didn't want tonight to end the way it always does. And how's that? With us pretending we didn't notice each other. My chest ached. I sat down on the edge of the bed, more out of necessity than choice. My legs felt weak, like they'd carried me somewhere my mind hadn't fully caught up with yet. He remained standing, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You know this is a bad idea, I said. Is it? He asked. Or is it just inconvenient? Inconvenient usually means bad, I muttered. He took a step closer. Not enough to touch me. Just enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. I don't know what I'm doing, he said, voice low. I just know that when I thought about leaving, it felt worse than staying. My thoughts spiraled. Every warning sign was there, flashing red. Friends, labels, expectations, everything we weren't saying. Ethan, I whispered, finally using his name like it mattered. You don't get to figure this out in my guest room at 2 in the morning. He smiled faintly, sadness flickering across his face. Then where? I didn't answer, because the truth was, part of me had already crossed that line long before tonight. I stood up, and for a moment, we were close enough that I could count his breaths. He smelled like rain and something familiar that made my chest ache. Neither of us touched, but the space between us felt louder than any contact could have been. Somewhere deep in the house, a door creaked softly, maybe from the pressure change, maybe from nothing at all. And in that quiet, suspended moment, I realized something terrifying. Whatever we were circling around had already begun. The only question left was whether we'd stop before it changed everything, or if we were already too late. The clock in the hallway ticked louder than it should have. Each second felt deliberate, accusatory, like it was counting down to something neither of us was brave enough to name. Ethan broke eye contact first. He stepped back, rubbing his hands together as if he were cold, though the room felt too warm now. The rain had softened into a steady whisper outside, sliding down the glass in long, distorted trails. The guest room felt cut off from the rest of the house, like it existed outside time. "This is stupid," he muttered. My chest tightened. "Then stop." He laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. "You say that like I haven't tried." He paced once across the room, then stopped near the dresser. His reflection stared back at him in the mirror, fractured by the dim light. I watched his shoulders rise and fall, the tension held there like he was carrying something too heavy to put down. "You don't know what this does to me," he said without turning around. I swallowed. "Then tell me." He shook his head. "I shouldn't. That hasn't stopped you so far." That got his attention. He turned slowly, eyes dark, expression unreadable. "You think this is easy for me?" he asked. "Showing up here, saying these things?" "No," I admitted. "I think it's dangerous." Something flickered in his gaze at that word. "Exactly." He took a step toward me. Then another. I didn't move. Every instinct screamed at me to create distance, to protect whatever fragile balance still existed. But another part of me, the one I'd spent years keeping quiet, stood frozen, terrified of what would happen if I did step away. "I've spent my whole life being told who I'm supposed to want," he said, voice low. "What I'm supposed to feel. And then I walk into your house, and suddenly none of that feels solid anymore." My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. "You don't get to put that on me," I whispered. "I know," he said immediately. "That's the worst part." He stopped less than an arm's length away. Close enough that the air between us felt charged. Close enough that I could see the faint scar near his eyebrow, the one I'd noticed a dozen times before and never asked about. I looked up at him. "Then why are you still standing here?" His jaw tightened. "Because if I leave now," he said, "I'll spend the rest of the night wondering what would have happened if I stayed." My breath caught. "And if you stay?" I asked. His eyes dropped briefly, to my mouth. Then back to my eyes. "Then everything changes." The words landed heavily between us. I thought about the years I'd spent convincing myself I was fine. About the nights that ended quietly, predictably. About how calm had started to feel like emptiness. "This isn't a movie," I said. "There's no clean ending. I'm not asking for clean." That should have scared me more than it did. I turned away first, needing space to breathe, to think. My gaze landed on the unmade bed, the sheets slightly rumpled from where he'd been sitting earlier. The sight of it sent a sharp, unexpected jolt through me. This was too real, too fast. "I don't want to be your experiment," I said, my voice tighter now. "I don't want to wake up tomorrow and realize I was just a moment of confusion." He was quiet for a long time. Then I felt it, not his touch, but his presence, closer than before. The warmth of him behind me. The way the room seemed to shrink around us. "You wouldn't be," he said softly. "That's the problem." I turned back to face him, my heart in my throat. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said carefully, "that this scares me more than anything I've ever wanted." My defenses wavered. I hated that part of myself, the one that responded to vulnerability like this. The one that leaned in instead of away. "You don't get to want me halfway," I said. His breath stuttered. "I don't think I am." The silence that followed felt electric. Then, unexpectedly, his phone buzzed. The sound shattered the moment like glass breaking. We both froze. Ethan cursed under his breath, reaching into his pocket. The glow of the screen lit his face, and I saw it, the shift. The return of reality. Whatever name flashed there, it pulled him somewhere else. "Don't answer it," I said before I could stop myself. He hesitated. That hesitation felt louder than any answer could have been. Finally, he declined the call and shoved the phone back into his pocket, hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." "No," I interrupted. "You did. That's the point." He looked at me like he was bracing for impact. "Say it. Whatever this is," I said, gesturing between us. "It doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are consequences. People. I know. Do you?" My voice cracked. "Because right now, it feels like you're standing in the doorway of my life, asking me to make room for something you haven't even named yet." He opened his mouth, then closed it. That was answer enough. The distance between us vanished, not because either of us planned it, but because the moment demanded it. He reached out, stopping just short of touching my arm, as if waiting for permission that might not come. "Tell me to go," he said. I looked at his hand, at the space between his fingers and my skin. My mind screamed yes. My heart said nothing. The rain outside grew heavier again, drumming against the roof, impatient. "I can't," I whispered. Something in his expression broke. He leaned in, not all the way. Just enough that his forehead rested briefly against mine. The contact was fleeting, almost accidental, but it sent a shock through me that made my breath hitch. For one suspended second, the world narrowed to that point of contact. Then he pulled back. "I shouldn't stay," he said hoarsely. "No," I agreed. "You shouldn't." Neither of us moved. The bed was right there. The door just beyond it. Two possible endings. Neither safe. Neither simple. He took a step back, then stopped, his voice barely audible. "If I walk out that door," he said, "this won't be over." My chest tightened painfully. "And if you don't?" I asked. He met my gaze, eyes full of something dangerously close to certainty. "Then nothing will ever be the same." The room held its breath. And so did we, because the next choice, whether he stayed or left, would change more than just the night. It would change us. Instead, Ethan moved past me slowly, as if the air itself had weight. His shoulder brushed mine, barely, but the contact sent a sharp awareness through my body. I felt it long after he stepped away, like a memory forming too fast. He sat on the bed again, this time farther back, hands braced behind him, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. I stayed where I was, near the door, suddenly unsure which side of the room I belonged on. The space between us felt wrong now. Too quiet, too charged. "I should go," he said again, but there was no urgency in his voice. I nodded, though my body didn't follow through. "Yeah." Neither of us moved. The lamp flickered softly, reacting to a distant rumble of thunder. Outside, the rain had eased into a steady drizzle, like the storm was losing interest, even if we weren't. Ethan laughed under his breath. "This is messed up." I exhaled shakily. "You're just realizing that now." He glanced at me, then looked away again. I didn't expect it to feel like this. Like what? Like I crossed something I can't uncross. The words settled into my chest, heavy and familiar. I sat down at the opposite edge of the bed, careful to keep distance between us. The mattress dipped slightly under my weight, a subtle reminder that we were sharing the same space now, physically, at least. "I keep thinking," he continued, "that tomorrow I'll wake up and convince myself this was just a weird night. Bad timing. Too much alcohol. And will you?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "No." That honesty scared me more than anything else he'd said. I rubbed my palms against my thighs, grounding myself in the sensation. "You know this doesn't end here, right?" He nodded. "Yeah. There are going to be questions. From you. From me." I swallowed. "From other people." "I know." The way he said it, steady, resigned, made my chest tighten. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It wasn't confusion. It was awareness. "I don't hate this," he admitted softly. "That's the problem." I closed my eyes briefly. The admission felt dangerous, like stepping too close to the edge of something irreversible. "Neither do I said, barely louder than the rain. That confession hung between us, fragile and exposed. He shifted slightly, turning toward me. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to feel the warmth of him again. I could sense the tension in his posture, the restraint in the way he held himself like he was afraid of moving too much. I've never done this before, he said. Felt this way, about someone like you. The phrasing wasn't accidental. Someone like me, I repeated. He met my eyes. Someone I wasn't supposed to. I studied his face, the uncertainty there, the fear, the pull of something he didn't fully understand yet. I'd seen that look before. On other people. On myself, years ago. And what happens now? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, turning it face down on the bed between us. The gesture felt symbolic. A choice, maybe. Or a delay. I don't know, he said finally. I just know I don't want to pretend this didn't happen. My heartbeat quickened. And if pretending is the only way things stay normal. He frowned slightly. Then maybe normal isn't worth keeping. That landed hard. The clock ticked on, unbothered by our uncertainty. Somewhere in the house, the refrigerator hummed softly. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Completely at odds with the way the room felt. Ethan stood up slowly, smoothing out his shirt like he was preparing himself. He walked toward the door, stopping just short of it. I'm going to leave, he said, not looking at me. Not because I want to. Because I need to think. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. Okay. He hesitated, then turned back. His gaze lingered on me, searching, unresolved. This isn't over, he said. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. I watched as he opened the door, the hallway light spilling in briefly before he stepped out. The sound of his footsteps faded slowly, deliberately, like he wanted me to hear every step away. The door clicked shut. I stayed seated on the bed long after he was gone, staring at the place where his phone had rested moments earlier. At the space he'd occupied. At the future he'd cracked open and then left behind. Outside, the rain finally stopped. And in the silence that followed, one question echoed louder than all the rest. Had he just walked out of my house? Or had he just walked into my life? Sunlight crept in through the blinds, thin and pale, tracing lines across the floor. I stood in the kitchen holding a mug of coffee I hadn't tasted, staring at nothing in particular. The rain was gone, replaced by an unsettling calm. Too calm. The kind that comes after something breaks. Ethan hadn't texted. I told myself that was expected. Necessary, even. He'd said he needed time. Space. And yet, every few minutes, my eyes drifted back to my phone like it might light up if I looked at it hard enough. At noon, I finally left the house. The city moved on like nothing had happened. Cars passed. People laughed on sidewalks. Somewhere, a siren wailed and faded into the distance. I felt disconnected from it all, like I was walking through a version of my life that no longer quite fit. I ran into him 3 days later. Not intentionally, not dramatically, just the cruel coincidence of a small cafe and bad timing. He was already there when I walked in, standing at the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair still damp like he'd rushed out of the shower. My chest tightened before I could stop it. He saw me at the same moment. For a split second, something raw crossed his face, surprise, relief, fear. Then it vanished, replaced by something carefully neutral. Hey, he said. Hey, that was it. One word each. Too casual, too controlled. We stood there, the space between us loaded with everything we weren't saying. The barista called his name. He grabbed his cup, then hesitated. How have you been? He asked, like the question didn't carry weight. Fine, I said automatically. He nodded. Yeah, me too. A lie. On both sides. Our fingers almost touched when he stepped past me. Almost. Close enough to make my breath hitch. Close enough to remind me how easily the distance had disappeared before. He paused at the door. I meant what I said, he murmured, not turning around. I know, I replied. Then he was gone. After that, things became careful. Group messages where he went quiet when I joined. Parties where we orbited the same room but never collided. Glances held half a second too long. Conversations that stopped just short of honesty. Nothing happened. And yet, everything had. Late at night, I replayed that moment over and over, the way he'd stayed, the way he'd almost crossed a line and then stopped. I wondered what would have happened if I'd said one thing differently. If I'd reached out. If I hadn't. Sometimes, my phone buzzed, and my heart jumped. It was never him, until one night, weeks later, when a message finally appeared. "Ethan, are you awake?" I stared at the screen, pulse racing. The house was quiet. The same walls. The same silence. Only now, I knew how easily it could all change. I typed. Deleted. Typed again. Before I could overthink it, another message came through. "Ethan, I can't stop thinking about that night. And I don't think pretending is working anymore." My thumb hovered over the screen. Because whatever I replied, whatever we decided next, would finally answer the question we'd been avoiding since the party ended. Was that night just a crack in the surface? Or the beginning of something neither of us was ready to face? That was the plan, at least. A predictable ending to a predictable party, music fading, guests drifting out in pairs and clusters, the kind of exhaustion that feels earned. I remember standing by the window as the last car pulled away, the streetlights glowing soft and orange through a thin veil of mist. Not rain, just damp air clinging to everything, like the city was holding its breath. Inside, the house still smelled like people. Perfume, sweat, spilled drinks, laughter that hadn't fully faded yet. I moved through the rooms on autopilot, stacking empty cups, switching off lamps, straightening cushions no one would sit on again tonight. Routine was comforting. Routine meant control. I told myself that's all this night would be. But even then, something felt off. Maybe it was the way the silence didn't settle right away. Or how the hallway seemed darker than usual, shadows stretching a little too far across the floor. I paused near the stairs, listening. The house made its normal sounds, wood contracting, pipes ticking, but beneath it, there was something else. A sense of expectation I couldn't explain. And then there was him. Ethan had arrived late, like he always did. Unannounced, unbothered. He'd stood near the doorway for a moment, scanning the room, before our eyes met. I'd felt it then, a brief jolt in my chest, sharp enough to make me look away too quickly. We exchanged a smile that lasted just long enough to mean something and not long enough to admit it. We didn't talk much. We never did. He laughed with the others. Leaned against the counter. Caught my eye when he thought I wasn't looking. Every time he did, my stomach tightened, like I was bracing for a question I didn't want asked. By the time the party wound down, I'd convinced myself I was imagining it. That whatever tension I felt was one-sided. That I was reading too much into nothing. That's when I noticed the light. The guest room, at the end of the hall. A thin line of yellow spilling out beneath the door. I stopped walking. Everyone had left. I was sure of it. I'd hugged people goodbye. I'd locked the front door. The house should have been empty, just me and the echo of a night already over. My heart began to beat faster, each thud loud in my ears. I stood there longer than I meant to, weighing the simplest option, turn around, go to bed, pretend I hadn't seen anything. But curiosity has a way of cutting through denial. I walked down the hallway slowly, my footsteps soft against the floor. With every step, my thoughts raced. Maybe someone had forgotten a jacket. Maybe I'd missed a goodbye. Maybe. The door creaked slightly as I pushed it open. And there he was, sitting on the edge of the bed, jacket off, head bowed, hands clasped together like he'd been waiting. He looked up when he heard me. "Hey," he said quietly. My throat went dry. The party was over. The house was silent. And somehow, the night was just beginning. I stood frozen in the doorway, one question pounding through my mind louder than the rest. Why was he still here, and why did it feel like he never really left?